You don't know what art is. Probably. When I say the word art, likely your first image is that of Renaissance paintings and sculptures, of magnificent works of years past that we look to today to admire our predecessors as well as, stand in awe of their achievements. And perhaps instead you picture modern artworks, the minimalism designed to remove all distraction and excess thought to expose the bare essence of the artwork. To say so much with so little, or maybe you just think of a fucking banana. Regardless of the exact imagery, it is nearly a fact that universally one's knee-jerk reaction when told to think of art is to construct thoughts that are generally congruent with the aforementioned. But this is not art. A notoriously difficult task in the discussion of art is defining it. Ask anyone and they will have their own version of what art is. Note that I am not saying it is difficult to agree on a definition, but rather the act of definition itself. The dilemma arises because people will often define it based on their initial thoughts, and in doing so have conflated, in my opinion anyways, essence with classification. What do I mean? In my usage here, essence is what a thing is, while the classification is how it is perceived. Think of an ice cube. Looking at it, you would say, this is an ice cube, and would classify it as such. But in essence, it is water, just a manipulated form of it. No matter how you manipulate water, barring total annihilation, there's a way to get it back to its essential state. Another way to look at it would be to say that water is comprised of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. So, even if you were to heat it up or cool it down, you wouldn't change this makeup at all. Just the space between atoms and their energy. So how does this all apply to art? Earlier I mentioned how difficult it is to define art, which is exactly what I'm going to attempt to do in this video. And by its length, you can already tell it will be no simple answer. Like I said before, everyone has their own definition for art, and if you ask Google, which you probably did, it would define it as
the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination, typically in a visual form such as painting or sculpture, producing works to be appreciated primarily for their beauty or emotional power.
This is the definition that most people mentally gravitate to. However, this is simply a classification under art as there are classifications under water. To its credit, it does allude to what I believe to be the essence of art in its next definition.
The various branches of creative activity, such as painting, music, literature, and dance.
This definition does the justice of expanding art beyond the borders of visual art, but does the disservice of limiting the definition to human creativity. In other words, passing off a broader classification as the essence. In her video, The Existential Comedy of Ben Shapiro's Awful Movie, The Morbid Zoo gives a rather insightful definition of art.
This is what people mean when they say all art is political. All art is a manufactured image of the world shaped by the perspective of the person telling it.
For context, here she's making a point about the intersection of politics and art and makes a claim that all art is political. Watch her video because it really is very good, and while not really related to this one, this next line is.
And politics, in the micro person-to-person sense, is basically the art of convincing another person to take your perspective seriously.
I want to narrow in on her explanation of art being the manifestation of one's personal view of the world, and politics being the act of convincing another that your worldview is the right worldview. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. However, it is only human nature to defend why we consider a thing beautiful in the hopes that others will see it as such as well. I mean, how many nights have been spent in heated debate with your friends about which celebrity is the most attractive? If we are to equate art to politics, then we begin to see a picture of its essence. In this video, I will go over a brief history of art and our understanding of it. From there, I will explore how these concepts have evolved over time and their roles in human society. By the end, I would have hoped to expand your understanding of what art is and what it can be, and finally answer the question, what is art? In 2021, we discovered what is currently considered the oldest artwork, a drawing of pigs in a cave in Indonesia. This drawing has been dated to being over 45,000 years old and would allude to this roughly being the era in which man first discovered art. The purpose of cave art is something we cannot know for certain. However, it is generally believed that they range from storytelling aids to religious works, purposes art continues to serve even today, and it is not hard to imagine why. Religions are typically associated with the spiritual and unknowable. As a result, they deal with concepts that are typically immaterial and conceptual more than physical. By necessity then, if you wanted to convey these beliefs to others, you would need rather complex metaphors, which would easily lead to more questions than answers. Or, you could draw out what you envision in your mind. In doing so, you have given material form to an immaterial object. In other words, you have created art. These ideals and understandings of art were crucial in shaping culture. Cultures across the world have used artworks to represent both their religions, cultures, folktales, great leaders, and figures of their community, etc. When the Europeans were doing their thing and committing colonizing across the globe, they were sure to entrench their cultures and values into the world stage. This, of course, means that their beliefs about art would also be entrenched. The ancient Greeks and Romans placed an emphasis on work that would long outlive anyone building them. From their statues and sculptures, their temples and their architecture, we can see their wish for an enduring legacy and things that remain of their time. The Romans had a particularly unique ability to not only let those they conquered keep their identities and ways of life, but also possess the ability to incorporate aspects of them into their own culture. So the Romans incorporated much of Greek culture into their own following the conquering of ancient Greece in the 2nd century BCE. This materialized itself in the adoption of the Greek pantheon and subsequent myths and practices, as well as Greek knowledge of art and architecture, combining them with the knowledge of past and subsequent conquests to build the great empire of Rome that we know today. As they say, it truly was not built in a day. The ancients had a fascination with the concept of beauty. Their pantheons were derived from the world around them, representations of the phenomena they saw in their own lives. These representations were often viewed as being divinely beautiful, so one could make the conclusion that they saw the world they lived in and saw such a beauty that they imagined their personifications to be ethereally beautiful themselves. One would be mistaken in considering only the 12 most important gods and any minor gods that are important to the stories of the aforementioned, but the truth is that they had hundreds, maybe thousands of them. For every Poseidon, there are a dozen Phorcys. This is because they would assign dominion over vast concepts to a major god, and then for every smaller thing within that domain, there would be a god for it. For example, there are many gods that are gods of only one or two specific animals or crops. This culture of assigning significance to even the most mundane of things required them to be rather inquisitive and creative. To tell such intricate stories about such complex concepts, one would necessarily have to spend much time thinking and debating. This in turn gave rise to the age of philosophy, as I would like to put it. The Greeks are often credited as fathers of philosophy, with the Romans carrying on the torch. Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Marcus Aurelius, Cicero, Hypatia, all and many more are names that till this day are revealed as grand philosophers whose musings have been quite influential to this very day. The age of philosophy, then, was at least partially responsible for having opened yet another corridor of artistic expression. As I earlier posited, art is political and therefore can be viewed as an act of persuasion, not necessarily in terms of an argument, but rather to persuade you to view the world from the artist's perspective, a representation of who they are, what they believe, and what they have experienced. With this understanding, it is rather easy to bring philosophy into the discussion of art. It is, by definition, a practice in which you seek out knowledge, ruminate upon said knowledge, and then create a worldview based on your musings. When you engage in philosophical debate, your goals are twofold: expressing your own beliefs, which, in turn, is done to persuade others these beliefs are correct. Philosophy, then, is an essentially artistic endeavor. At this point, we are deep within the Middle Ages and as such deep into the rise in Europe. As with the Greeks before, the Romans had co-opted the Christian religion and installed it as their own. This meant that the many nations under their rule had at the very least been introduced to Christianity, if not outright converted. The rise of Christianity led to, of course, a rise in Christian art. Like I said before, every single culture has at some point used art to represent their beliefs, and the Christians were no different. The difference here is the prevailing narrative around art. Medieval Christians viewed art as a means to glorify God, and as such would retain the use of certain expensive pigments for the use of holy works, like drawings and letterings within the Bible, as well as paintings of their Lord. An example of this is how at this time blue was famously kept exclusive for the Virgin Mary. In this way, religion and art have become intertwined and sacred. At this time, the only people allowed to engage in the act of religious artwork were primarily educated men who had committed their lives to the service of God. Around this time, art was put into two buckets: the glorification of God and the glorification of the king. Art was almost entirely related to religion, and when it was not, it was related to the king and his monarchy. I know many noblemen had their own portraits and such, but these were more often personal effects than artistic goods meant to be consumed, as it were. In this way, art was a bedrock for European culture, as it unified the two most important facets of any European peasant's view of themselves and their view of the world. This would change with the Renaissance. As I'm sure you could tell, the relationship between man and art was more or less oppressive. It was restricted to a very small portion of the population for the most part, and almost entirely was designed to make the beholder feel insignificant. From the use of expensive materials to the grand scope of the artworks and the framing of their subjects, art was designed to show the majesty of the subjects and would therefore force the beholder to compare themselves and be doomed to inevitably fall short. Europe was not exactly unique in their views of art during the medieval period, with most cultures around the world having a rather similar view of using art and its mediums to glorify their deities and their sovereigns. With the introduction of the concept of humanism in the Renaissance era, we would see a significant change in how we would view art worldwide. Humanism is
an outlook or system of thought attaching prime importance to human rather than divine or supernatural matters. Humanist beliefs stress the potential value and goodness of human beings, emphasize common human needs, and seek solely rational ways of solving human problems.
In other words, it is in direct opposition to the prevailing ideals of the time. Humanism saw a revival in ancient Greek and Roman thought, which would see many daring to think outside the confines of Christian thought, and as such led to an utter revival of art. When discussing the Renaissance era, it is often instinct to discuss the visual artworks of the time, without considering what really spawned these works. It is easy to assume that by simply telling people it is not really a big deal to make non-religious art anymore, you can get them to kick off on Renaissance. But the truth is that before any brushes are put to canvas, the people would have had to first change how they perceive themselves and the world. By increasing the perceived value of the non-noble person, people began to see themselves and their experiences as important. This would lead to people being far more interested in cultivating themselves and their interests, as well as being far more interested in seeing the experiences of their fellow man. This is the key to the art explosion of the Renaissance, the idea that one matters and that their perspectives matters. This became the foundation of essentially all liberalism moving forward, and once again, we have entered the intersection of art and politics. At this point, the art as we know it now had been cemented. No matter the medium, you would see the same concepts. The central idea of creating something and defying tradition has defined art as we know it. And this is most evident in the mediums of fashion and music, where the prevailing ideals change very frequently as they are quite elastic to the personal identities of their artists. The view of arts as something deeply human and tied to the human experience had become essentially law. Even today, when people try to exclude things from being considered art, see rap music, AI-generated art, modern art, etc., it is on the basis that it does not meet their criteria for being based in and evoking human emotion. Personally, I think this is a completely arbitrary demarcation. In my opinion, to limit art to be a uniquely human phenomena is rather naive. I am not going to make the case here that animals should be viewed as artists, although I won't argue they can't ever be, but rather that they themselves are art. In fact, human beings are art. Not because we are made in the image of an all-powerful being, but because of the fact that we exist at all. Mathematics is its own art form, being derived from the core understanding of one's world and how it operates. Math is no worse as a representation of reality than a painting. The difference lies in its delivery and object of primary attention. The existence of math in nature would then posit that art itself is ingrained within nature. The golden ratio shows us that mathematics and the universe go hand in hand, just being one of many examples of seemingly human mathematical concepts predating our existence in nature. So, to finally answer the question, what is art? To create art, you must give form to that which does not yet exist in the world. Art, then, is existence. To exist is to be a work of art. The existence of living things is determined by how their ancestors view the world and were viewed by the world, how they relate with other living things. After all, peaceful species are more likely to have a wider gene pool in comparison to a species that is constantly trying to kill each other. The existence of a sentient being is defined by the acquisition of knowledge. The molding of personal and societal identities, therefore, is based once again on their relations to themselves and others. The existence of an inanimate or non-living object is either the remnants of grand cosmological, atmospheric, or geological activity, or through the intervention of a living thing. In either scenario, it is a physical remnant of the story that it tells. Each discovery telling us more about ancient people and the planet we live on, and the universe that exists within. In this way, even science is art, with physics being the most closely related to it. All of this is before even getting into the intricacies of cellular and molecular structures. To exist is to be the representation of ideals and of stories and events that one will never know. To die is to cease to exist and to pass on your gift of existence to others, becoming nutrition for new life, and as such, having re-entered the cycle of art. Your death in itself is a work of art, as it represents the cessation of your life's work and the commencement of your post-mortem effects. If your death has inspired another in any way to do anything, then that act is artistic. Existence requires expression and cooperation. Existence requires a deep connection to all things that have and will ever exist. The essence of art is existence, and all things that exist are classifications of art. If there is a God, then they are the greatest artist of all, for they created existence, they created art itself. To summarize, if a thing can be said to exist, it can be said to be art. I am not saying that one should change the dictionary definition of art or anything, but I believe that understanding art as being that which exists will allow us to find the beauty and therefore the art in everything around us, just as the ancients did before us. Originally, I wanted to make this video more to expand on our general horizons of what art is and initiate a conversation, but during the writing and researching, I began to really dwell on what art is conceptually. I won't go too deep into it in this video, but my own personal philosophies have encouraged me to view things more from a top-down perspective, trying not to fall victims to the trappings of pragmatical thought, to not see things as obviously true when there's little defining proof of it. This attempt at mind change has led to a much more active thought process when it comes to perceiving the world. I became of the opinion that people classify things out of ease. Take the tale of the debate between King Milinda and the wise man Nagasena. The tale is one of the Hindu religion, and it is an attempt to understand the nature of a thing. Nagasena posits that Nagasena is not a thing at all. Rather, it is a shorthand that refers to a combination of things in a certain way at a certain time. Take a chariot. A chariot is not a chariot. It is just the word we use to classify all those parts, the wheel, the cabin, the ropes, the horses, everything. We used to classify them together in that organization. That is what a chariot is. Regardless of your agreement with the thesis, it makes you think rather deeply about things. It encourages you to not take things at face value and to dwell deeply on the nature of things. As many of you may or may not know, this channel started for me to talk about fashion, and I've been trying to push this narrative that fashion is art. That thought is what first led me to think of this video, and taking a Nagasenian view of art has allowed me to further expand my designing capabilities. I always recommend people to study philosophy, and this is one of many reasons. Applying this philosophy to art was part of what led me to the conclusions of this video. Thank you all for watching, and if you found value within the video, please like and subscribe. Let me know your own thoughts in the comments and other topics you would like to see me cover. And yeah, have a good one.